Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We've got another wonderful talk planned for you today. We're going to be speaking to my friend Gary Evans in just a few moments about the Yoga-Sutras and a bit more going in depth into that particular topic. But before we get started, I'd like to welcome my assistant producer and, assistant director at the BernardAlvarez.com empire, whatever you want to call it. It's Treva Lynn Knott joining me live from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hi, Treva. How are you today?
Hello. I'm doing fine. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good today. We had a holiday weekend here in the United States, and I'm a little bit tired, but that's quite all right. Mm-hmm. Feels good to be here, and it feels good to hear your voice. Is everything going well with you this week?
Yeah, so far.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very, very good. Well, Treva is going to be on the chat room taking your questions in case we miss them, and if you have anything, please make sure to direct them toward her. We're here for the next hour, and we are going to be speaking, like I said, with my good friend Gary Evans. Gary Evans is an awakening mentor, a tour guide, a PR marketing person, a consciousness speaker, and so much more. And he's joining us live today. And Gary, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Yeah, hi, Bernard. It's good to be back. Always good to speak with you. And I'm doing well.
Very good, very good. Where are you in the world today?
I've just come back from London to just south of London in Surrey. So
Okay.
still in England.
Okay. So you're joining us live from the UK then?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So Gary, we were talking a bit about the show, and I found it very interesting because the Yoga-Sutras is not something that has been in my, I guess, peripheral vision when it comes to the awakening process. I've probably studied many of the ancient scripts, anything from the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Buddhist teachings, but I never really ran across the Yoga-Sutras, and I really don't know much about them, which is why I was so glad when you approached me with this show. And so I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, what are the Yoga-Sutras?
Well, as you mentioned, I mean, I've been reading a lot of the same books, the Bhagavad Gita, and working my way through a lot of these iconic ancient materials. And the big difference between the Bhagavad Gita on the whole and the Yoga-Sutras is that the Yoga-Sutras is basically the mechanism. The Bhagavad Gita has a lot of kind of allegory, and it's kind of removed thinking that doesn't really tell you how to accomplish what they're speaking about. And the Yoga-Sutras is the practical problems. It breaks the problems down, and then it tells you, okay, well, this is the problem with the mind on the whole, emotional problems. These are the problems that we encounter as humans. This is what you can do. So if you want to grow your consciousness, if you want to keep this path of the awakening going forwards, it's pretty much a how to do it manual, and the main ingredient being the individual person's determination to follow that. And that's why I really fell in love with it, because from my travels and the yoga and all of the people I come into contact with, I realised it isn't actually intellectual information from others that helps me grow the most. It is practical tips. Mm-hmm. This is what helped me. Try it. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I love hearing. And then I'll go away and try it and decide for myself if it really helps or if it just helps perhaps other people, and then select all of those things that I see this inner growth happening from, and then incorporate those into my regime as often as possible. And so it's been a revelation, the Yoga Sutras. I went to it because I decided to become a yoga teacher, and it's basically the source text or one of them, and yoga being very different to the yoga as recognized in the West. So it's definitely on the whole watered down here, and the original yoga as described in the sutras is about the mind and how we grow as an individual.
I am so happy you mentioned that, Gary, because that was going to be my next question. I'm not a fan of yoga. I've never gotten really good at it, but I have gone to many classes, everything from live classes to video classes to group classes, whatever it may be. And I have never heard any of the teachers talk about the Yoga Sutras. And so I guess my main question is the Yoga Sutras yoga? And like you said, I guess it's fair to say they've kind of dropped them off, or what is your take on that? And how much of it is the foundation of it?
That is a very good point that you've raised, because, I mean, I've been to hundreds and hundreds of yoga classes, and only I think only my main teachers ever mentioned it from the teachers I've been to in England and the US, because most people, okay, they like the physical side, the postures, and then once you've been doing yoga a while, you understand that actually the relaxation part at the end of yoga is really the most enjoyable part, because that's what we're trying to do, trying to relax the busy mind.
Yes.
Get into this very quiet place and connect to what I would call the stillness. And that's really where this, what we can only call the kind of spiritual energy, or this kind of recharge on a soul level, for want of a better term, can take place. So that's about as far as most of the yoga classes I've been to go. And they don't normally tell you why you're going into the shavasana, the resting at the end, just that you can have a rest.
Right.
Now, occasionally, some of the classes I go to, and my regular teacher introduces a bit of philosophy, because we have a slower form of yoga, the yin poses, which you hold for up to 5 minutes. So there's time for a little bit of reading and thought on the deeper side. But that is rare from my experience. Of course, there are teachers around that do that, and those would be the ones I would encourage to try and seek them out, ask the teachers their approach to the classes before you go, perhaps. But then when you read the Yoga Sutras, you realize all of these other layers. And yoga is a way of living. The postures are really barely mentioned in the sutras. It's a mechanism that's used for controlling the mind and basically well-being and fitness. But it's a tiny fraction of the book. So, I mean, if you looked at how often they've mentioned the postures, maybe 5% of the book, then 95% is what we've lost in the West, basically. So it's a huge proportion of this original system for developing consciousness that we don't know is missing. And of course, time is changing. The posture side is widely accepted. The shavasana, the resting side, I think is becoming more widely accepted. So perhaps we're ready for the next phase of yoga, where we go into it in a deeper way. I would hope so.
Yes, me too. I would think that would be the inevitable next step, is to bring the consciousness of it. And I can't help but acknowledge that, let's say a yoga class that I went to versus a Tai Chi class that I've gone to. And Tai Chi, while it is about movement, it seems to be the focus is on the energy and how much of that is missing and modernized or westernized yoga is the focus of energy.
That's a good point, and it is something that we do in the yin yoga, because it is supposed to work on the meridian system of the body.
Oh, it is wonderful.
Yeah, Yeah, so my yoga teacher normally says various postures affect different meridians, the acupuncture pressure points, and so by putting pressure for an extended period of time, it does have an effect on these energy streams around the body. And so when we finish holding, we do normally a series of postures for 3 to 5 minutes, and after a series of them, lay down on the mat, and she says, now tune into your body and see if you can notice any subtle changes. So when you start that process, of course, it's a bit of an alien way of thinking. It's not something we're used to doing. But over time, as I did it with her, and I mean, it's been 6 years I've been going to her now. Over time, I did start to feel these subtle sensations. And that was a big part of how I started to feel these subtle sensations at the ancient sites. It was by having that sensitivity. So the yoga helped me develop that, I would say.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you've recently have been working on developing a new website. Your new website is called Awakening Mentor at awakeningmentor.cu.uk. And from what I've gathered, what you've shared with me, and what I see on the website is you're kind of trying to break down some of the principles and some of the fundamentals of the Yoga Sutras and how they can help us to have a clearer understanding of our mind and how we can accelerate our awakening process. Can you share with us a little bit, an overview about your website and these the 10 sections that you seem to have a good focus on there?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, it's awakeningmentor.co.uk. The driving force for the website came from the events that I was running in London, these heart awakening events, and there was a lot of sharing and hearing about people's struggles with what we have to call, I think, the awakening process. I also went to some other people's workshops, and they had something that they called ceremonies. So again, it was lots of discussions about people's worldview changing. They didn't know what was happening. They were starting to seek out answers. In one particular group, we did cacao ceremony, which is the chocolate from South America, which has a kind of a gentle, nurturing, heart-opening effect. It's nothing like the kind of illegal drugs. It's obviously legal. It's pure chocolate. It's a very gentle heart-opening for you to hear that subtle voice within. And at this particular event, one guy started to talk, and he was saying about the problems in his life and how he always kind of felt on the periphery of groups and just kind of monitoring. And I was listening to him talk, and I was thinking, wow, that was me 10 years ago. And then it moved to the next person and the next person, and the next person. I could see the stages that I've been through reflected in all of these people, the struggles, the things that I'd worked on to try and overcome. I mean, I'm not the finished article by any means. The Yoga Sutras makes that quite clear. Mm-hmm. But the majority of people haven't don't have the opportunity or haven't gone into this subject as deeply as I had, or had the opportunities that I've had. So I feel very fortunate to have spoken to hundreds of people now that are on this journey, shared amazing experiences with many of them. So the problems that I've had and the discussions I've had with these people, including top authors, a lot of these problems are known. The issues that we face awakening, ways to overcome it, different ideas. There is a known system, and I'd worked out a number of those points. And then when I picked up the Yoga Sutras, I could compare what I'd worked out on my own journey with what was in the Yoga Sutras. And the mirror was incredible. These deep things that I'd had to go within to work on, and it had taken years, were just spoken about matter-of-factly in the Yoga Sutras. Mm. So that gave me the confidence in the material, because, of course, how do we know that the Yoga Sutras are reliable? There's millions, hundreds of millions of books. There's different teachers. There's different styles. I mean, there's so much out there, and not everything is appropriate for each of us. But for me, when I could connect the Yoga Sutras with my own journeys and deep personal experiences that I'd never discussed or been able to go into, and it was all written about. It gave me a confidence that the source was a very, very good one, and it was certainly capable of helping me. And then there's also the philosophy of Schwaller de Lubitz, which would take a little while to talk about, but he spent a lot of time at one of my favourite temples in Egypt, and he went very, very deeply into the aspects of consciousness and heart-based emotional intelligence, as we've discussed previously. Mm-hmm. And there are many correspondence points between what he discusses and the Yoga Sutras, and in fact, the Yoga Sutras have helped me to understand what he was saying, because his work is very difficult to penetrate into. As the Yoga Sutras are also not particularly easy for the average person, because it's a different kind of language. There's the Sanskrit, it's translated into English. There are a number of barriers, which is why I think I can be of use to some people, to try and break these subjects down into kind of modern language that's easier to grasp. So that was the real impetus for this website. And when I started building it, yes, I wanted to offer a mentoring service, but I really don't like kind of exclusive, I'll give you information if you pay me kind of things, because I want to help everybody. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I started designing it, I thought, let these problems I just kept hearing about in London over and over from all these different individuals, how much peace of mind could I potentially give to people by just giving them what I've got? Even if it only helps one person a little bit, everything is worthwhile. So I've tried to put a lot of information on there. It is, in fact, that there's a lot of tools that people don't need my services for. Some people won't need me, so there might be some things for them. Some people may be able to pick up the Yoga Sutras and just read through it, and it gives them what they need. But there's going to be other people that just need a guide or a bit of assistance understanding what the sutras are trying to convey, or perhaps they like the personal approach where we look at their life and their problems and how we apply some of these things. And that's really, I guess, the market, the people that I could speak to and help on a one-on-one basis. So that's kind of I've dedicated myself to pretty strongly recently. It's been a lot of hours going into it. Yeah, and I hope it's of value. I mean, it took on a life of its own. Honestly, I have actually been feeling blessed to be a part of the creation of the website, because I kind of felt like it's not coming from my mind. It's coming from way beyond that level. Things that have come out while I was typing, thinking very deeply, or just kind of meditating. It's been a surprise to myself, so I hope other people enjoy it as much as I did.
Well, I think it's wonderful, Gary, and I, as someone who recently started offering coaching or consulting as well, I know that feeling of wanting to help other people. For me, it was a matter of I got so tired of answering questions on email and Facebook. I was like, well, just book a session, you know. and there are people that really deserve to have that type of offer that you're offering, some type of mentorship and some type of one-on-one individual guidance. For me, you know, I was very lucky to have teachers from multiple levels, from multiple disciplines, and just having casual relationships with people was very good for me. But
yeah,
some of us really prefer to have that one-on-one type of a mentorship program working with us. And speaking of which, what is speaking of your website and speaking of the mentorship thing, what would be the one? I don't want to say the most important, but let's say perhaps in the beginning, something that would need to be offered to someone who is seeking awakening through the Yoga Sutras. What would be that first step that they would probably need to take?
Well, I put on the website that if you're only going to read one article of the 10, then my advice is to read the article titled Right Knowledge. Because, I mean, a lot of the problems I heard about recently is the beliefs system that we have, what we think about ourselves. These kind of problems, the words that we hear in our head that other people have called us, this kind of self-image that is often based on somebody's nasty comment maybe once or twice in their lifetime, and we've taken that on board and limited ourselves. So in the Yoga-Sutras, it talks about the types of knowledge that are reliable and the types of knowledge that are not reliable, and it breaks it down really into 3 sections. And so just by reading that small article, I basically want people to think about where their ideas about reality are coming from. Who are they coming from? Are the sources that they base their worldview on reliable sources? Because we need to start questioning a lot of the things that we believe about reality, because it's a lot different to the education that we were given in a much more beautiful way. And to get to that beauty, we need to get to our hearts. So just to sum up right knowledge, I mean, it makes the actual sutra that discusses this, the sources of right knowledge are direct perception, inference, and scriptural testimony. So I broke that down further. So it's like direct perception, which on one level it can mean if you see something happen, if you have witnessed it directly, then that is correct. That is part of reality. But the Yoga-Sutras says sometimes the senses, like we can mishear something, we catch a glimpse of something out the corner of our eye, and basically we guess what it might be. So even looking, hearing, can let us down. So the deeper level of direct perception, which they go into in more detail, is something that we experience in a very deep meditative place. When we go to that place and there are none of the physical senses involved, then that is the best way to get to this right knowledge. The second thing was the inference, and they use the example, if you see smoke on the horizon, then by inference and based on your experience, if you see smoke, it means that there's a fire. So that's another way that we can use this right knowledge, but it has to be obviously based on experience and not guesswork. And really, for the subjects of this conversation, the point that they're making is this scriptural testimony, that which has come down. It also means a traditional doctrine or system which commands some kind of faith or belief in it. And that's really the question that probably a lot of people listening would ask, is why the Yoga-Sutras? Why do I place my faith in this system? So I've just fallen in love with this information. Read the Amazon reviews. A lot of people on there have really got it. And the reason that they're saying in the Yoga-Sutras this information that's come down, because it's almost, if we look at yoga and these kind of spiritual practices that have come down from India and the East, there is a peer review process, much like the scientific process, and that is gurus and yogis have been testing this knowledge from the Yoga-Sutras for thousands of years, and the reason that it survived is because the root is certainly very pure, if not one of the purest, and we don't even know how old the information is, because it really goes back to the start of writing. How long was it passed down verbally before it was written down? From the depth of the material, I'd probably make the argument that it goes right back. As soon as we as a species, whenever that was, started to see our consciousness growing and some of these techniques started to emerge, then that's probably the roots of this. So the roots of awakening going back at least 4,000 years by academic acknowledgement, could go back 10,000 or more. And that's why this system is a reliable source, in my opinion.
Now, when you're speaking of the text, are we referring to the Yoga-Sutras of Patanjali?
Yes, yeah, that's right. And it's probably a good point to make that it is not a religious system. One of the nice things about the real yoga is that it can be open to anybody that finds it of interest. You can see from my studying of the history of it, I think what we find in the Yoga-Sutras is where the later religions developed from. So it's the other way round. Previously, there was probably some form of understanding that we would call the understanding of how the mind works and yoga. And from what I could tell from my studying, later on religion came along and they tried to explain some of these deeper concepts, which are quite hard for some people to grasp. So they've basically created the gods and different principles to explain these inner workings of the mind and consciousness in a way that's more palatable by the average person. That's what I worked out. That's my best guess at the moment, anyway.
Right. Well, you have to admit, I mean, I know that I find that the older the system that has been carried on through time has definitely given me a certain, I don't want to say a certain faith, but a certain respect in something that has worked for so long, whether it be yoga, or whether it be Buddhist principles. Anyway, we're going to return speaking to Gary Evans after this short break. We'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Let me just take a moment to remind everybody that if you are enjoying the radio show here, or if you are a member of our fan page, the Bernard Alvarez fan page, we have so much more material available for you. We've got my entire body of work spanning almost a decade over at bernardalvarez.com. We have a brand new show, a video series that just came out a couple of weeks ago called Activate, and kind of along the same lines as Gary's work, just not necessarily implementing the Yoga-Sutras, but it's become very popular, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in for that. By all means, if you'd like to take a deeper look into the work that I'm doing behind the scenes, you can go to bernardalvarez.com. And without further ado, let me welcome back my guest, Gary Evans, and remind you that if you would like to learn more about Gary's new project, working with the Yoga-Sutras, you can go to awakeningmentor.co.uk. Anyway, so welcome back to the show, Gary, and I'm really enjoying our discussion today because, again, this is something that I haven't had the time and or the ability to dig my teeth into, the Yoga-Sutras. And we were chatting a little bit during the break about our connection to nature and animals and the life force, and I feel that's something that many of us have lost touch with. Could you share a little bit on how that ties into what the Yoga-Sutras say about the purpose of life?
Yes, certainly. Well, it's one of my favourite subjects to talk about, our connection to the natural world. That's I'm developing the TV show in Hollywood about these subtle forces of the planet. But this is an area that, of course, all of us have an understanding of. how we feel when we spend time in nature, how we feel in different beautiful places, or maybe even just how we feel after a busy, stressful day and going and sitting in the yard or the garden and just having that bird song or the feel of grass under our feet, etc. But it is fundamental to this whole system of yoga and the Yoga-Sutras, this connection, how we connect. What does that mean, connecting to nature? And Schwaller de Lubitz, who I referenced earlier, he describes it in connection with ancient Egypt, but I believe it applies to how we connect to nature everywhere. And his way of summing it up is this way. He says, to cultivate oneself to be simple and to see simply is the first task of anyone wishing to approach the sacred symbolism of ancient Egypt. This is necessary because the obvious blinds us. In other words, we see a pigeon every day. It's obviously a pigeon. We put no interest into that pigeon. However, if we do spend time looking at the pigeon, we start to understand what the pigeon does and how the pigeon interacts with the world around it. So he says the obvious blinds us, the obvious being our perception of the world via cerebral consciousness alone, because this scientific kind of rational mindedness, it divides, analyzes and granulates our experience. So even if we're looking at the pigeon, I mean, we could be thinking, we're probably thinking about what we're going to be doing later if we're not in the present moment. And if we're kind of present with the pigeon, we might not be just being the pigeon. And really, what the Yoga-Sutras is saying is be mindful in nature, be present in the moment, and basically put your awareness into that pigeon as if you were the pigeon that was walking along the grass, finding food. And try to, when it finds something to eat, just try to experience what that might be like. And by repeating this process with trees, animals, insects, our consciousness expands into nature, and our awareness of basically the world, other people, is expanding with that process. And I think this is what the training the Greeks had to go through before they were allowed to study in ancient Egypt. They had to train for 20 years. And when I looked at the training for the Druids, to train to be a Druid took 20 years. And well, what could you be doing back in those days for 20 years when there wasn't any TV? Then the only conclusion that I could reach was their teacher must be nature. They must have to go into nature and do something for 20 years and then come back. You would expect with some kind of a test. And if you went to the ancient Egyptian priest, he says, okay, you've spent your 20 years wisely in nature, understanding the forces, the way that the different animals interact, how this also represents your inner nature that's been forgotten through what we call civilization. This is also part of your being. Now I'm ready to teach you about these higher rungs of consciousness that exist beyond what we see now. So I think that's something along the kind of system that was taking place in the past. Mm. And the Yoga-Sutras, I mean, it's about 220 odd pages long, and by page 34 and 35, it sums up the purpose of life for you.
Wow.
And it was a different purpose of life than I was thinking. Of course, I mean, is it accurate? That's what we, of course, have to question. I mean, the Yoga-Sutra says question everything. All I can say is, based on my experience and my conversations with others and the inner work that I've done, the Yoga-Sutras hasn't been wrong about anything yet. So if that continues in the rest of the book, then the purpose of life is a bit different to the one that we thought we were having. You could say the game we're playing is a different game to what we thought. So I thought it was worth this is the big one that most of us are trying to wonder about. So I could just give you a brief example.
Absolutely.
So the sutra translated into English those who merely leave their physical bodies and attain the state of celestial deities, or those who get merged in nature, have a rebirth. So that's all he really gives you, and then it's commented on by the guy that's translated this sutra, Swami Satchitananda, and so his understanding of what Patanjali is telling us. It says, once you gain a certain mastery over nature, but lose this body before attaining the highest goal of liberation, you go on to become one of the controllers of nature, and basically they call those people vidahas. Suppose you have mastered the gross elements without going into the subtler ones. You become the controller of the gross elements of nature. If you had stopped at the practice, and there's basically these different levels of very deep meditation that it can teach you about, having reached the very depth of nature, you would have become the master of nature. Such people are called the Siddha Purusas, or the gods who control the different phenomena, and they were given names in the Hindu scriptures. But whoever they become, they have to come back to study further and get liberated. Temporarily, they have dropped out of nature, but to get the final degree, they have to enter the university again. We drop out temporarily, but if we are interested in getting the degree, we have to go back to the university. And basically, the earth is that university. You go to a certain point and get into a higher abode and control nature, but still the seeds of desires and attachments are there. You are not completely liberated, so you come back again to fulfill the other practices and get the degree. That's why even the gods have to become human beings. It's only on the human level that there is a possibility of getting liberation. The gods are just human beings who have evolved a little further and learned to control nature, and by that control have earned the enjoyment of certain pleasures in the heavens. But after that they come back. This coming and going will always be there till they burn all the seeds of desire and become completely liberated by knowing themselves.
That's beautiful.
And those last two words, knowing themselves, is what the whole book's basically about.
I would say so, and to incorporate what you were talking about with nature, I fully believe that we don't know ourselves until we perhaps understand our connection with the natural forces that are around us, whether it be, like you said, how the trees grow, how the sun rises, whatnot, at least having some type of alignment with that energy, that life force, and understanding that that life force is within us, within the world around us, and within everybody and everything around us. We don't necessarily have that ability to transcend to the higher realms that you were speaking of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was a different take on the big question than I'd read before, and I mean, just that peace that comes. I mean, I've really been getting into walking through the woods and understanding the chemical interaction with the human body, with what's coming off of the plants and the trees. D-limonene is the chemical that's in the air a lot, and how it produces this kind of state of relaxation in the body. And because I've been studying a lot of essential oils recently to understand what that's all about. So, I mean, anyone listening, if you already love nature, then you're obviously heading in the right direction, and just try and spend more time in the landscape being mindful. And if you don't spend much time because it seems like life's too stressful or busy, then by spending time in nature, that it will help transmute that stress and bring you into a calmer place, because that's what we need to do. I mean, I put an exercise on the website to try and illustrate to people how busy their mind is from that place of stillness that we were talking about in yoga. How many layers of thought are between each of us and that stillness? And so there's a process by writing it down. You can start to see how full up your head is with all of these different thoughts. And to get to that stillness, somehow we've either got to get these thoughts out of our head down on paper, or we've got to learn enough get enough control over our minds where these thoughts aren't constantly bubbling up and distracting us. And that's really the art of mindfulness. So if you write down all of the thoughts that, I mean, they're going to keep coming up for most people. We're very busy, our minds. It will give you an idea of how full up your head is and how much is going on normally. And when you get that down on paper and then try and meditate, you will probably find it much, much easier, because there is a mechanism recognized in psychology where the brain tries to hold on to information and keeps it as a current thought pattern until it's written down. And when it's written down, the brain kind of seems to go, oh, they've written it down, I don't need to remember that so much anymore. So it may well help. A lot of people have either their first meditative experience or perhaps go a bit deeper than normal, I hope.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Gary. I was literally going to ask you to explain mindfulness a bit, and you went right into a beautiful synchronicity with our thoughts here today. And with that being said, it does seem to be probably the number one, I don't want to say complaint, but let's say the number one obstacle that is presented to me as a meditator or doing what I'm doing as justBernard. People are very concerned on slowing down their mind, getting into the moment, being here now, so to speak, is definitely probably the number one concern for most people. And I think you described it very well and gave us some great tips on how to slow down that mind and to get into the moment.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I said on the website was, if you listen to a mantra, I mean, it doesn't have to be Sanskrit, although that's what I'd probably recommend because I love them so much. But any repetitive phrase, if you listen to that and then you try to stay in sync with it, you'll see how many thoughts are coming up. And then you can try this exercise, then go back to the mantra and see how much quieter your mind is. And basically, if you can repeat a mantra for several minutes at a time, you're going to start getting into this place of the intuitive state where the mind is basically quiet and you can hear your heart and intuition much more clearly. So that's really the goal that a lot of people could aspire to, because once you start hearing those very subtle voices, it can be very transformative in a positive way.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you brought that up. I feel that for me as a spiritual teacher, that's kind of one of the goals I have with the people that I work with, whether it be in spiritual coaching, whether it be someone watching my videos or reading my book. I feel that my goal is to get people to have that conversation with their higher self, the heart self, and to allow that subtle dialogue to be a part of their life, to be the motivator. And from what you're describing, through some of the steps that you've mentioned, that is possible.
Yeah, well, just trying to make it easily understandable and give some tools for people, because mindfulness is, I mean, it's like anything. You practice, then you get better at it, and if you're consistently practicing, then you'll get better at it quickly. If you don't have the opportunity for some reason that probably you've given yourself to practice as often, then the process will take longer. And if you only do it very, very occasionally, then the process of learning to meditate will take a long time. So
right.
It's how you apply it and how often you practice. And I wouldn't consider myself an expert. I mean, I know the mechanism. If I've had a quite calm day, which I haven't had that many recently, then it's quite easy to get into a mindful place. If I've been rushing around, if I've had a coffee, one of my bad habits still, some kind of stimulant, it will make my mind race, and it'll be harder to get into this still kind of place. So yeah, don't have any stimulants before trying to meditate. That's another, because it makes the job a lot harder.
You can say that again. It's funny. Does the Yoga-Sutras bring up the concept of ego, for lack of a better term?
Well, it does. I mean, it touches upon it from a number of different perspectives, the mind, trying to regain control.
Okay.
Um,
I mentioned that because I've had a mantra on my mind the last few days, and it's because I'm working with a student right now. And this is what we're working on, but I can't help but know, well, the mantra is, and believe it or not, I got it from a movie, Little Buddha, which is a great movie if anyone hasn't seen it yet. It's Keanu Reeves as Siddhartha, and it tells the story. But anyway, in the movie, he uses the mantra. Lord of my ego, you are merely an illusion. You do not exist. And it's just so funny because I had mentioned it to this or was going to mention it to the student. I started using that again, after years, 20 years ago, I think I probably heard that, or 15, whenever that movie came out. And it's so funny how the ego immediately gets defensive. Like, what do you mean I don't exist? And it's just like what you said, how the mind tries to regain control, or I don't know if they want to call it the mind, but our thoughts want to distract us from the fact that, our thoughts are important, not as much as our spirit, perhaps.
Yeah. They don't really, the ego is not referenced in any of the sutras in the actual break, in the original sutras that I can remember. Right. It is referenced in the explanations, again, because it's something that we recognize. I mean, in the sutras, one of the ones that applies to the ego is the restraint of the modifications of the mind stuff is yoga. And then it goes into discussing these thought ripples that the mind produces. So I mean, that's why they keep talking about it as a kind of scientific approach. The ego, what we call the ego, is an aspect of the mind, and we've kind of shaped it into this thing through thinking about it. But they're trying to talk about the level below that, the actual mechanism that happens, if you follow. So we've put a label on it, that's something that we can't measure, but you can certainly count the amount of thoughts that come up.
Yes, and that's what I appreciate. I really appreciate that. I think I feel that putting a label on something kind of distances us from that particular form or thought form, whatever it is that you want to call it. But like you said, the dynamic of what we're trying to do is to acknowledge the thoughts and how the mechanism of the mind works, and how, I always call meditation going to that place between the thoughts. And people are like, how do you do that? How do I get between the thoughts? I can barely get a hold of one thought without another one coming in, so to be able to illustrate it in that way is wonderful.
So, I mean, that's what we're going to try and slow the mind down. So if we don't take the stimulants, we get these thoughts down on paper, then we get an idea of what we feel like in a bit of a calmer environment. Maybe we need to take a bath. I mean, the things that help us calm down, if you put a few of those different things together and then start to understand that state of being that is very calm without constant thoughts coming up. So that's who we're trying to work towards being more of the time. And that's why the more you're in that state, the more you help yourself relax into that state, then the more easy it is to get back to it. And then it starts slowly to integrate into life to the point where even when you're having a conversation with somebody else, you can be mindful and just listen without these thoughts coming up. So basically I practice mindfulness when I'm listening to other people. That's one. I think that's probably when I've spent the most time practicing it.
Wonderful. Well, Gary, I hate to say it, but we are out of time already. My goodness, time flew by. And what's next for you? Are you going to be doing any tours or anything in the near future?
I'm working on a number of new projects. I've actually got a private tour in Egypt with my girlfriend next month, so I'm hoping to go more deeply into some experiences at the temple.
Wonderful. Well, I thank you very much, Gary. And again, everyone, his website is awakeningmentor.co.uk. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time. I will be off next week, by the way, everybody. I hope you. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye bye.